Thank you for inviting. My name's Shaun Carter. I'm the New South Wales chapter president of the Australian Institute of Architects. I'm also a practitioner, and I'm also here in my capacity as a member of the community. And the great challenge of going last with so many great thinkers of the urban project that we have here today is how do you say something that hasn't been said already? So, look, I think this is a great conversation that we're having. It seems like from what I've heard today, this conversation's 15 years in the process. Recently, I heard that change takes about 40 years to occur. If you're lucky and all things are pulling in the right direction, that change can be brought down to 30 years, and in very rare circumstances, sometimes 20 years. Seems like at the 15-year mark, we really need to hit that 20-year process. And we need to do that because, and as we all know here, we're playing catch up in so many areas. We for so long, we didn't build infrastructure, not only our transport infrastructure, but our housing infrastructure. At the same time, our federal government were, on both sides of the aisle, as a bipartisan agreement, have been talking about a 36 to 50 million sized population for this country. So we've had this desire to grow. We know that small populations and large land masses have traditionally not fared that well. But at the same time, we've not had any leadership about what growth looks like. Many of us travel overseas and we see some extraordinary cities, significantly bigger urban areas and more dense urban areas than we have here. I think that's very easy to explain to Australians what growth could look like, or density, but we don't seem to do it. So we're playing with catch-up, and we've got so many moving parts. So how does this play out? And particularly, I want to talk about the challenges of design excellence. We've all gone through the detail of it here today. But what does the people outside of the profession think about it? What do the people outside the built environment think? Twitter's a great source. This is a story that ran recently. This is great thanks to Narelle C. I hope she doesn't mind me pinching her Twitter account. It is public. This was a story that ran in the Herald, I think last week or the week before. This, to the average citizen, looks weird. Actually, it looks weird to me. This is one half of a semi. Narelle says, inner west development craziness. How did this get approved? And it's fascinating. It's actually remarkable. I don't know how they did this. So there's certainly a skill there somewhere. And I guess my point is, in many areas of Sydney, and I think we've touched on this a little bit, in many areas of Sydney, I think the conversation that we have to have first, or the conversation we have to win first, is design quality before we can move to design excellence. Now, around design quality, I think I'm talking good versus bad as opposed to good versus excellence. And if we can have that conversation more broadly, as all of us as leaders in the built environment, out into the community, these are conversations I have at the drugstore on Smith Street, Summer Hill. I'm the local built environment professional, and I get cornered, Shaun, how did this happen? And so you go through a process of conversation. Clearly this is this small part in Lewisham. I think the locals call it the Lewisham Towers precinct. It's a small part that has, it's been rezoned. Clearly there's been a big uplift in floor space, and this is part of a dynamic that has happened. I don't think this is a good dynamic. I think there could have been a greater strategy around it. So to bring the people along with us, so that we can have this broader conversation about what design excellence is, about how we want to see our built environment. I think in many parts of the city, we've got to win the design quality conversation first before we move on. The next part, and I guess this is a qualitative thing, and conversations we've had in and around the Institute for a while, and it's, I think here there's unanimous agreement that CEP 65 and the ADG is a wonderful design document. It's the only design document we have in this country to date. It mandates minimum standards of amenity and hopefully minimum standards of design. Yet when I talk to people about how they like their apartment with their lovely north-facing living room and their cross ventilation, they say, you know what, Shaun? My bloody bathroom leaks. You know, my tiles are falling off, my windows leak. It's a conversation I can't have with people that I'm trying to really understand how Step 65 is translating in a general sense when I can't get beyond the conversation of building defects. And I think this is a bigger conversation. I think this conversation is also beginning to play out at the moment. I think it's one of the great challenges around design excellence is when we take the ideas off the drawing board and put it into built reality, some of that is getting lost in translation and making it really hard for us to get, I guess, qualitative data from people when they can't move beyond some very simple things. I guess the next thing, and another conversation we're having in around the local community, is public domain. Architecture or the design of buildings frames an edge between different parts of public domain. So this is, again, in my local community, it's a part of Lewisham that has changed quite dramatically. It was an old urban area. I'm not sure how this got approved, whether it was part of a Part 3A process or it was a local government proposal. I think this is one of the better ones, by the way. This is a really busy road. This is Old Canterbury Road. That traffic light intersection, there's a school about 100 metres up the way. The building is about 2 metres from the curb and gutter. And we really have to get, I think, a second part or a second part of that conversation of design excellence, which is our public domain. So here Step 65 can mandate minimum standards for apartment amenity and design quality. I think the other part of that suite is around a streets policy and a public domains policy. So that when people look at that and they go, oh, that just seems really hard and urban in little old Lewisham, yet we can have some of our most dense areas in the country. Here's a picture from Potts Point. And you have these beautiful trees and these lovely streets, not roads, streets that where traffic's move at quite slow speeds, beautiful tree-lined avenues. The great thing about a tree is it can hide a bad bit of design. A good bit of architecture can't make a bad street better. So I think we need to win those conversations. The last thing that I think is really encouraging from my point of view from being the president of the Institute of Architects, and I guess my broader role as advocacy outside of just the architecture space, are the buildings that people want to talk to me about. Now, the fascinating thing about the buildings that people want to talk to me about is they're also buildings that I would say are excellent design. And this is, I think, our great challenge as leaders in the built environment space for us to go out there and to be able to prosecute why design excellence is fundamental to how we start to think about planning this city, beyond all the other challenges we spoke today. So here's a few buildings that people want to talk to me about beyond architects. Indigo Slam, last night won the Robin Boyd, that's the national award for housing. It also won the state award. Some people joke that it's a house masquerading as a gallery. It's also an extraordinary piece of architecture that's been widely recognised in a very short period of time, and it captures the public's imagination. They want to know more about it. Central Park, I mean, we can have an academic conversation about this building around Step 65 and compliance. I have to say this building is one of two buildings that people want to talk to me about more than anything else. And I think it's very bold in so many ways. I mean, the Heliostat is a really interesting thing. I personally think that probably would have got knocked off in the first conversation in the design tutor class in first year, but it survived and people love it. And I am constantly amazed at that. The other thing is that this green canopy idea, that people can see buildings that typically been quite harsh can be quite warm and friendly. And I think this one's warm and friendly by the extraordinary success of how the gardens grow on it. Now, I know there's an enormous amount of energy and 8 gardeners that go into making this. It also starts to change the conversation with the general public about what an apartment building can be and about what their city can be. The other building that people want to talk to me about a lot, perhaps the most, is Frank Geary's Dr. Chow Chak Wing building. Here I've shown it not from the drone's eye view, which is a popular thing that people like to show buildings in design proposals. To my knowledge, we don't live up there with the drone. We live down here in the public domain. Here's a really a bold piece of architecture, procured through a university process for a business school. I think it's interesting the business school got this building, not the architecture department. I think that says a lot. But people, it's fascinating that people really want to engage with this, and it really starts to move the conversation about what a building can be and how the design can really play an important part in this. It's also been anchored by perhaps the best bit of public domain we've built in the last 3 or 4 years, which is the goods line, which is a great public promenade that's connecting great public buildings all together. Which is a really topical point of conversation for all of us here in Sydney, because right at the moment when Sydney has a great habit of accidentally getting some really great pieces of urban design and public domain. The Opera House is a great example. Here, in many ways, it feels like this one slipped through the net. And just as it arrives and people start to use it, it connects the university with the train station, with the ABC, all the way down to the powerhouse. We start having conversations where governments want to rob Peter and pay Paul and take a bit of a loved public institution in a gallery and relocate it. I think you've got to look at this as a great success and all the parts in that make it a great success, and you've got to leave it intact, in fact reinforce that. Public parks and public domains. Here was the old, this is Ballast Point Park. I'm sure it has another name. This is how I know it. A McGregor-Coxall scheme. It's a great bit of landscape. It was the old Ampol site, I believe, that had all this housing development. It's turned into this great park. It's really quite an old park. You know, an old park in that you have to find the things, or the kids have to find the things to do, like rolling down the hill or climbing the rocks. And I think this was a great, again, another seeming like great fluke that landed in the city. But it's also another area where people can engage with this idea of design quality and how that can improve their lives. Much like the park down there in Darling Harbour or in Darling Quarter, where we can have this great bit of public infrastructure where the people can actually use it and engage with it. And I used to take my daughter down here, and she loved it, but it was so crowded and so popular, probably because it was so rare, that we stopped going after a while. But people didn't stop going there. It's incredibly loved. So moving that conversation on, I think design excellence's great challenge is for all of us to be able to explain to the people outside this room why it really matters and how we can explain some of the things that are happening in the city today. Thank you.